Hello and welcome to Let's Get the Skinny. I am so excited because today on the show I have the lovely Whitney Uland. Whitney, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am more excited because I was just telling Whitney before we started recording that I am like her OG groupie. I am obsessed with everything that Whitney talks about. I don't follow a lot of people on TikTok, but if I am ever going to stop and watch a video, it's going to be one of Whitney's. And Whitney is an award winning filmmaker, actress. She's a multi six figure business owner, and her work has been seen around the world on TV and theaters, at festivals. She's also the co president of the junior division of the Hollywood Radio and Television Society. And basically, why I am so obsessed with her work is she now helps artists, creatives, and influencers around the world tap into celebrity energy to create the fame that they know they are meant for. So I wanted to start off by asking, why do you think that everyone wants to be famous? And or is that even true? I guess someone who, let's be real, I also want to be famous. I feel like, of course, everyone wants to. But am I totally wrong in even asking that question to begin with?
It's so funny because a lot of the time in my comments, people will be like, wait, doesn't everyone want this? And actually, no. It's like, I think because it's like a desire we have, it's something that we just kind of assume everyone does. Like, oh, yeah, of course, like everyone wants money. But no, there are so many people that are not interested in fame. They want privacy, they want a life of seclusion. And I'm just such a big believer. So, what I like to say is your desires are your dharma. And what I mean by that is if you have a desire, it's leading to the way that you are meant to like serve on the earth. So, like for you, the reason you have that desire is because you have a gift for helping people and helping them in their body and their health and, feeling empowered. And so that's like your mission. And so I'm just like, I always joke that I'm usually the first stop for people where it's like, I'm the safe space to admit you want to be famous and like create that because I just am such a believer that usually the best people who have those big desires to help people often are the least likely to go after fame because they get in their head about it and they're, what will my parents think? And they hear all these stories and whatever. So anyway, I'm obviously, I'll talk about this all day. I love it.
I love it. And it's so interesting because you saying that, you're a safe space to admit that. I remember dating like a shitty boyfriend, and he would always say that, like, oh no, it's famous people are the ones that don't really want to be famous or that they don't care about fame. And so I think I started to kind of adopt that same limiting belief around like, oh, like real celebrities like don't even want to be a
It just
celebrity.
happens to them, right? They're just
Yeah.
special. They can't help it.
Yeah. And would you agree with that? Like, is it, I mean, even, I don't know, who is it? Like Scarlett Johansson, like doesn't like to have any sort of, social media following, etc. I feel like in order to be cool, you kind of have to pretend like you don't even care or that you don't want attention. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that is like totally a result of press, right? Like if you think about like especially with like actors and actresses, like they especially and this is changing, right? We're in this new dawn of like, with the internet and what I create are self-made celebrities. So it is a little bit different, when we're looking at like a Scarlett Johansson who kind of went through that like traditional route of fame. At this point though, that's kind of an old school way of looking at it, right? Like we look at the movie stars now, like I just made a TikTok about Renee Rapp. She's kind of like the it girl of the moment, and she does utilize social media, and that's why we like her so much. We're really at a place where people actually want to know just not your work, and they don't just want a mysterious actress who can pop in and out, but they want that specific. They want you. They want to know who you are. So, yeah, no, I'm a big believer that press made it look like these people never wanted to be famous, and that's what there's a lot of conditioning that we have that people who want to be famous are self-centered or egocentric or whatever, and so I think that a lot of, there's interviews with Tom Holland saying he hates being famous. And, I think I think for them, that's a little bit of a privilege that they can say, but it's also something that is probably a little bit of a defense mechanism because it is brash. It is bold to admit, I want to be famous. Like people are going to judge you. And so I think it's a little bit easier for people to just kind of pretend like they don't actually have that desire. And, when they're at that level of fame, they don't have to connect with social media and things like that. But yeah, I think that's the old days of fame.
Totally. I agree. And actually, I agree with that in also in relation to beauty. I think I remember it was years and years ago, Angelina Jolie said some sort of comment as if like beauty doesn't matter. And I remember as a kid telling my mom, like, obviously, like if you're freaking beautiful, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It's kind of like because then you already have that, right? So,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I'm
um,
also just, like such a believer that like so I always say like fame is just the resource of having people's attention, right? And it's really just giving you a voice. And now again, thanks to the internet, everyone can have a voice. And so for me, like having a voice is power. And that's so to have the internet, to have the ability to become a self-made celebrity is a redistribution of power, and it's giving way to like new voices and new representation and important messages. And so that's also just why I'm so passionate about it, is because I'm like, yeah, let's get the people with good messages, let's get them behind, with the mic, let's hand them the mic and empower them to create the resource of fame.
Totally. And before I get into some questions around like the how to, because I definitely I want the 411 on all the steps. But before we get into that, I think it would be helpful. I know your story because I watch all of your videos. But how did you actually get into this? Why did you recognize that, like, okay, you know what? There's this whole celebrity energy thing is something that can actually be explained, taught, learned, and then utilized.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, so my story is, there's so many parts of it. It's like I'll write a memoir about it one day. Right. But I think that like what encapsulates it the most is I was an actress in New York City, and I was doing the grind. I was going, if you're not familiar as an actress, you have to be in the union to audition for union roles. So like to be on Broadway, you have to already be part of the union, but you can't get in the union unless you already have one of those roles. It's like this whole catch 22 where you can't, whatever. So I was literally waking up at 4 a.m. and going downtown and waiting in line outside in the cold to try and get an audition for shows. And I couldn't, like, I was just working so hard and not getting anything. And I finally met this manager, and she was like, you have talent, I see something in you. And she's made a lot of, she had made a lot of stars, and I trusted her, and she, had an eye for talent for sure. And so for a couple of years, for 2 years, I went down to her office once a week on Wednesday nights. I went down to Madison Square Garden or Madison Square Park, and she would just tear me apart. She would just rip me to shreds, and she would not only critique my acting and, my headshots, my marketing materials, but the way I spoke to people. I remember one time she told me that I wasn't popping off because I responded to emails too quickly. Like she would just, it was like this crazy power dynamic. She was a very, I mean, it was abusive ultimately, but what she came to was she finally, after 2 years of just tearing me down and then being like, why aren't you getting work? She was like, well, it's just because you don't have the it factor. And that really was kind of when I had this awakening of like, I think maybe this is not the right dynamic for me and I need to remove myself from the situation. But it also set me on this quest to be like, yeah, what is the it factor? Like, why don't I have it? Like, what is this? And at that time, I had already started, I had hired a life coach just to help me in my life. And I was, anyway, all of this to say, I was starting to learn the tools of mindset. I was learning the tools of mindfulness, of, meditation. And I have all of this extensive acting training. I have a degree in acting. I've studied with all of the best teachers. And it was when I was finally kind of able to blend those two things together and say like, oh, this is what the it factor is. And realizing, so the it factor that's what I call celebrity energy. And it's really this ability to capture people's attention. And it's the thing that no one can quite put a finger on, but when you know it, when you see it, when you walk into a room with someone who has it, you can't stop looking at them. It's why, like, when I live in Los Angeles, and I can be in the grocery store and I'm like, I don't know who that is, but I know that they're a celebrity, right? And like they could be wearing such an unassuming outfit, but it is this aura, it's this identity, it's this presence. And people usually think you have to be born with it, and that's not true. And so with like all of my research and digging and just like literally years of being like, what is this and how can I get it, I figured it out. And it really is just, there are steps to do it. And that's I've worked with so many artists, creators, and influencers now that I actually have a 6-step process for teaching it, because it's like just kind of a formula, which is really fun. So that's basically how I found it, and then decided to implement it myself and in my business, and have been able to build like, and of course, once I did it, that's when I was able to join the union and sign with the top agency and, get like all of those, like I booked this television job that came to me. They just made me an offer out of nowhere. And then they brought me back for another episode and they wrote my jokes into the script. And like, I got a deal. I had a development deal for a new series and I wrote on this movie with Lucy Hale. And like all of these things just started really snowballing. And I obviously still love acting, writing, directing, but it was when I was like, wait, I love helping people do this too. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I landed where I am.
So amazing. And I don't want to obviously give away your proprietary method because I know that you have kind of more extensive courses to dive into that. But what would you mind sharing maybe one or two of the steps that you maybe feel are most forgotten or most unique, or kind of the steps that people often don't think about or miss?
100%. Yeah. So what it ultimately comes down to, and there's really just like, so there's two steps. You can implement this however, like anyone, the steps are not proprietary to me. Of course, I have my own ways of doing them, but the only things you really have to do. So essentially this it factor, this magnetism. So it's kind of a joke in the acting community that you never want to do a scene with a baby or with a dog. And the reason is not because they're annoying, but it's because they will what's called pull focus, which means audiences only want to watch them. And
Mm.
it's like, and it's like you can be watching this amazing beautiful scene, but we really just want to watch the dog who's like just sitting there, right? And the reason is because it's a hyper presence. So they're in this state, and it's a state where there's no fear. And when you're in a state where there's no fear, that's when you become magnetic. So another way that I like to think about this is when I lived in New York City and I would take the subway, if I was taking it home late at night and someone got on the subway who kind of scared me, I would energetically just I would be afraid. So I would put up walls, right? And I would be like, I don't want this person to talk to me. I just want to blend in. Now, if we have any kind of fear around being seen, we're going to inadvertently put those walls up, right? So if you've ever had a negative experience in the spotlight, if your family doesn't understand what you're doing, if you've posted a video and it failed, if it flopped, like any time that you've been in the spotlight and it turned into something negative, it taught you to put that exact same energy up. And so the work is really an undoing of that so that you can get back to your hyper presence. The same as, we all have it. It's why it's kind of like, just because there's fog in front of a mountain doesn't mean that the mountain is not there, right? And so it's really just removing that fog. So the two steps that you have to do to be able to get that, and to tap back into that innate quality that you have and you're born with, the first thing is, I like to say, it's rewiring your brain. So what we want to do is get really familiar. What are the self-limiting beliefs that we have? What are these stories we've been taught? What have we been conditioned to believe about ourselves? I work with so many people who are and I do work with, white straight men, but for the most part, that's not my clients, right? It's people who have in some way, whether they're a woman, whether they're a person of color, whether they have a neurodivergency, whatever it is, for whatever reason, they've been taught that their voice doesn't matter. And so the work that we're doing is really, it's rewiring these stories in our brain and changing the neural pathways, so that you start to feel safe. And then the second thing is, I say, you have to hack your nervous system. So with this, it's, again, of course, I have my own methods for both of these things, but as far as hacking your brain, that's the therapy, that's hiring a coach, that's doing the journaling, that's coming up with really diving into all of these self-limiting beliefs. And then the hacking your nervous system, it's the breath work, it's the meditation, it's the yoga, it's the acupuncture, it's the things that actually make your body feel safe having these experiences, because there are so many things you can do. I don't know if you would think weight loss is one of them. For me, it was, where it's like, I was afraid, but I could still lose weight. But with fame, you can't, because if you're afraid, you put those walls up. And so then people can't actually access you. So it's really the work and this is why I'm so passionate about it, is because I get to help these incredible people heal and feel safe being seen. And like, actually, it's not about fake it till you make it and just put yourself out there and be consistent in your posts or whatever. It's like actually removing these blocks so that you feel safe, so that it just naturally, you're able to then exist and shine the light that you were born with.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And I think that's why I gravitate towards your work so much, because I can tell it's healing at a deeper level. I mean, regardless of if you become famous or not, and I'm using air quotes here, it really is, it's admitting to yourself one of your, I'm sure you're familiar with Lacey Phillips, to be magnetic. And one of her sort of, I think she calls it authentic code. Like one of hers is being seen. And I remember really relating to that and feeling like, oh, wow, like it's okay to say that you want to be seen.
Mhm.
And so interesting. Have you ever worked with anyone that they really felt like they did want to be famous and then going through the work they realized that they didn't? Or is it usually just a matter of kind of like getting through that obstacle of admitting to yourself that you actually do want to be seen in this world?
That's a really good question. What I see the most is not a desire to not be famous. Sometimes what usually happens is people have a desire for fame, it leads them to some healing, and then they realize like, oh, I actually only wanted to be an actor because I was trying to get attention from my parents and this was a way that I received love. But then once we clear that out, they actually still want to be famous, but it's just coming from a healthier place. And it's
Yeah.
coming from this like unattached place where it's not conditional on your worthiness. And so it's just like more free. But then the second thing, and this is probably more common, is that I do see a lot of pivots. So people
Yeah.
who are like, and this is why, again, I say your desires are your dharma, like just trust, even if you're like, I want to be a famous singer, I've seen this before where it's like a client wants to be a famous singer and then we trust that and we follow their, and we're getting clearer and clearer on their voice and their passion and their unique talent. And then they pivot and they become this like incredibly successful, one of the clients I'm thinking of, she was just in Vogue for her like design skills. Like she's an interior designer. So it's like she still has that resource of fame, but it's something that's like way more aligned than what she like originally thought, if that makes sense.
Mm,
And that can be kind of
totally.
scary to admit when people are like, wait, but I don't want to lose this thing. And I'm like, no, 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 it's going to be way better. It's going to be something you love even more. If that makes sense.
Totally. Totally. And you mentioned about kind of having that energy, like the subway example, right? If you have fear, you are gonna, naturally disappear. What do you think? And I know that you've said you can't just fake it till you make it, but is there an element of being like, can it sometimes feel like you're faking it, like in the sense of like faking confidence? Like is there any value to that in the sense of like, okay, like put on a brave face and like, lower your inhibitions? Or does it really does that only make things worse in your experience?
That's a really good question. I think what I see sometimes with my clients is they get to this place where they're like, oh, if I'm experiencing fear, then I shouldn't even go for it and I should wait till there's no fear. Typically what I recommend, if we're at that point, it's actually that you have all of the like I want you to just make sure it's like you have all of the awareness, you know what you're getting into, you're seeing the fear, you're looking it in the eye, and you're taking action in spite of it. Because it is true that when you take the action, that is part of the nervous system regulation, right? Where it's like the first time, one of my clients I was working with the other day, she couldn't figure out how to make videos go viral if it had her face in it. So she could make a funny video if it was like a video of a cat or like a little clip online or whatever. But as soon as it was her face, none of those videos were popping off. And so then we've been working together for about 4 weeks. She got this like huge, the first video of hers with her face on it has like 80,000 views. And now she's like, but there's some fear there. And so part of the work is like, we have these, like, I like to call this like an energetic thermostat. So a thermostat, if it gets too hot, the air is going to kick on. If it gets too cold, the heat's going to kick on. So we have these like thermostats of what we're comfortable with being seen. So what this looks like a lot are people, it's like when they come to me when like their audience has capped out, or like this client, her thermostat was like, I can create fame if it's not my face, right? It's just like deeper levels of vulnerability. And so part of the work is regulating your nervous system while you take those actions. So while you're, I'm not a fan of just like do it anyway, but like, can you do it while you're really tending to your nervous system? Because once you do it, and like, with this client, we're continuing to take the action because that's where her nervous system learns like, okay, I know this felt scary, but it's actually safe. And that's what like shows your brain like, oh, we are okay. This is okay here. Does that make sense?
Totally, it does. And as you said earlier, like rewiring your brain, I mean, it is going to feel awkward and different. If it just felt really natural and comfortable all the time, you're obviously
Like,
not
what are
doing
we
it.
doing? Right?
And is there any sort of daily practices or rituals or things that you suggest for your clients, just for those listening today, and they're kind of like, okay, I want to get into that, and obviously it does require doing the deeper work and possibly with someone to kind of guide them. But in terms of kind of daily practices to tap into your celebrity energy, is there any that you recommend?
I love that. I think there are a couple of things. So one is I would say like even just the daily journaling, if you can give yourself 5 minutes to just word vomit onto a page, that in and of itself, it's like I like to think of that like taking out the trash of your brain, right? Like where it's just like let's just clean things up here. And then I also maybe we can. I'm happy to include a link for our download for your listeners if you want a. I have a little meditation that I totally recommend to my clients, and a lot of them love to use this, at night when they're falling asleep or in the day or whatever, but it really just subconsciously starts to tell your brain it's safe to take up space, it's safe to use my voice, it's safe to do these things. And I get like it's so fun, like even people that have just ever like they've never paid me a dime, but they're like getting these insane transformations just from like doing this like free hypnosis meditation.
Oh,
So
amazing. Definitely let's include that. And we are going to finish on talking a little bit about your course. But before we dive into that, I just wanted to ask you just some like fun, random little wellnessy questions just about you personally, because obviously you are very successful and you radiate health to me. So, I mean, if you're not, you're faking it well. So I would love to know little rituals that you do, or whether it's around your relationship to food or exercise or, diet, supplement. Is there anything that you feel like is a really core element of you feeling good in your personal and professional life?
yeah, oh, that's such a good question. And I think this really, like, for me, ties into a lot of the work that I see you doing. And that's why, I'm so excited that you want to be famous and create more fame and all of this because I'm like that your message is so important. And I think, yeah, like for me, I did work before I had my baby. I had an intuitive eating coach, and it really transformed not only my relationship with my body and myself, but that is, again, it's this stepping into your intuition and your own power and trusting yourself. That's the same skill you need to create fame. So like really, and I'm at a point right now, I'm postpartum, my husband and I are separating, my ex and I are separating. And so it's been like a lot, but that is something I'm like, I don't have time for the exercise, or I'm not great at taking my multivitamin and my probiotic. And like, I've had the times where I have done all of the things and I've created a really solid foundation for myself and all of that. But the one thing that I can always come back to is like tuning into my body, right? And like what is my body looking for, and like what are the foods that can serve it, and when am I actually hungry and when am I not, and just having that skill for myself has just been like invaluable and like truly life changing.
Oh, that's amazing. Guys, I didn't even pay Whitney to say that. But thank you. I would have if I knew. So that's so wonderful. And would you mind sharing a little bit more about specifically your course? I mean, I think I want to take it. I'm sure anyone listening that is a fame whore like me also wants to take it. So where shall we go to get all the deets on that?
Yeah, so I have a special discount code for your audience, and so we'll make sure that your audience has this. But so there's a couple of ways that, like, basically, and I'm giving you the caveat of this. So my main program, when people want to work with me, I have a 6-month program. It's called the Self-Made Celebrity. Now that's a program where it's a deep dive coaching hybrid. So like, of course, that's something, if someone wants to find me and look me up. But I also, this is kind of like a secret thing, is that all of the coursework for that I have as a course, or like all of the digital, like the exercise and the 6-step process I do have as a course. So I wanted to offer that to your audience. We have a $50 off little discount code for y'all. And yeah, so it's called this like Self-Made Celebrity Starter Pack. So it's basically all of the steps. You can do it at your own pace and learn. I like to say, fame is like a video game where it's like new levels, new devils, but it's really just this rinse and repeat process. I've worked with clients from full-time students all the way to award-winning red carpet celebrities, and the process is all of the same. So these really are the 6 steps that you just like, it's a skill that you learn to rinse and repeat to create more and more levels of fame. So yeah, I'll send that your way for sure.
Amazing. And I will be sure to link that in the show notes. I think that we hear and I think a lot of my audience, we're always hearing about these wellnessy courses that are, breath work and, yoga and all of these things, but, to be magnetic, Lacey Phillips. But I think that your offerings actually really support all of that work. It's really getting to the core of you and letting that shine through. So I'm so excited. And thank you so much for chatting. This was so fun.
This is so fun. Thank you so much for having me. You are a light, and I'm so grateful to be here.